And welcome again all to Sort Yourself Out, how to get more out of life. Thank you all for sharing about where you're at and what you're hoping to get from here, which gives me a good sense of kind of who is in the room, and hopefully I'll be able to tailor this a little bit more to your exact needs. Also, I want to let you know that because we're recording, if any of you would like to get the replay of this, what I would encourage you to do is you can private message me your email and I will send it to you at the end. Also, if
sorry, I had a problem with my internet. It's sorted now, but
good.
the Zoom I'm sorry about that.
No problem. So
I haven't missed anything.
okay, I'm just gonna mute you, okay? And then when you wanna talk later on, feel free to come back on. So as I was saying, you can just private message me your emails for those of you who want the recording. Also, anybody who is gonna want like additional resources and things like that, make sure to put down your email, and then I will follow up with you afterwards. All right. So with that, let's jump right in. So just wanted to first introduce myself. I am Dr. Sharon Grossman. I am a coach and a psychologist, and I've been doing therapy for about 20 years now. And kind of simultaneously on the side, I was doing some coaching. And then what I decided to do recently is to just pivot 100% into coaching, because I really love this work, and I love just the ability, like you all are coming in from different places, and it's an opportunity for me to work with people from really all over the globe, which I find really exciting because I love just the outreach and the ability to do this kind of work. And so this is part of my decision process. Also, a few years back, I decided to really specialize in things like anxiety, overwhelm, and burnout in particular. And I wrote a book on burnout, which I'm happy to share with you later. And that's a great tool for people who are feeling like, I think, Suzanne, you mentioned you're struggling with this, people who want to like coach themselves through burnout, because it's got a lot of worksheets and questionnaires and online resources and things that you can do on your own. So some people like to do this work on their own and kind of are a do-it-yourself kind of a person. And other people want that kind of more direct coaching, working with someone. And that's part of what we're doing here today, is kind of working together. And I do that. I do kind of burnout work, but I also started this whole other wing, which is about teaching people how to go and do deeper work. And part of the reason for that is because, well, let me just give you kind of the model so you understand kind of where I'm coming from. So if anybody here has heard of cognitive behavioral therapy, then you'll know that there's this linear way in which things work in the world. We have our circumstances. So these are things that are happening. So we can take things like COVID. It's just a circumstance. It's something that's happened. And it's basically all of our circumstances are, number one, facts, right? It's not like my opinion that there's COVID. It's just a fact. It's something that is. And number two, they're neutral. Okay. And then we have a thought about the circumstance, which then brings up everything kind of in a cascade format. So some people here might have thoughts about COVID that, this is a horrible thing, that it's like really scary, that it is totally disruptive and all that. And then you're going to feel, when you have those kinds of thoughts, really stressed out about it, really anxious about the future, things of that nature. When you think about that circumstance of COVID, and I know people like this who actually thought this was a fantastic, like the best thing that's happened to my life. Like some people will say, oh, I really revitalized my business. I changed my career. I moved. Like now I can live anywhere. I can work from home. Like some people thought it was fantastic, right? It's just their way of thinking about it is that. And then they feel obviously very differently because their feelings are always aligned with their thoughts. So our thoughts are very important in terms of how we feel. And I feel like a lot of times people don't understand that how this works. So when they have an emotion like anxiety, a lot of you mentioned today, something that you're struggling with, the idea is I got to do something to get rid of my anxiety, right? And the truth of the matter is we're focused way too much, in my opinion, on our behaviors, doing something, right? We're all kind of these doers in the world. We always I need to do another thing. And it's really hard to change from a behavioral standpoint if we continue to have thoughts that create the anxiety in the first place, right? So if it trickles down in this order, then I can do something on a behavioral standpoint, but it's kind of like I already have created the problem and I've got to clean up the mess, as opposed to like just start at the top and then I have a lot less anxiety produced to begin with, and then I don't have to clean it up. Does that make sense? Anybody? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And guys, I know you're all muted. So for those of you who have your cameras on, you could just kind of give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down so I can kind of get a sense. And then for those of you who don't have your cameras on, if you want to kind of join in, I feel like it becomes a little bit more interactive when we can see each other. So I invite you to do that if you so choose. So that's really the sequence in which things happen, right? We have the circumstances, we have our thoughts, which are essentially our interpretations, our ways of making meaning of things. And then that creates how we feel. And then our emotions actually are the fuel for our behaviors. So how many people here have ever wanted to change a habit and found it really difficult to do it no matter how much you've tried, like even if you were successful at first, like just even to stick with it? How many people by a show of hands had that be really difficult? Yeah. So this is actually pretty common, right? One of the things we see a lot, I'll just use this as an example, is people who want to lose weight, right? So obviously people gain weight for a variety of different reasons, but one of the main reasons is emotional eating, right? So when we feel really stressed or really depressed or really frustrated or really just out of sorts, one of the ways that we cope sometimes is we eat. And so then you're like, okay, well, now I've gained all this weight. I need to go on a diet. So what do we do when we're on this diet is we'll count calories, and then we try to restrict the food that we eat. And we're like, oh, we're not going to have ice cream. I'm not going to have this. I'm just going to have salads and I'm going to exercise and all that stuff. So what we're doing is we're trying to solve this problem from a behavioral standpoint. And the truth of the matter is that it's really hard to lose the weight, or even if you lose the weight, right? What you do is you eventually gain it back because your whole pattern hasn't really shifted. If you continue to have thoughts that create the anxiety or the stress or whatever the emotional state is that is then causing you to eat to deal with that emotional state, then working on this from a behavioral standpoint is going to be really challenging. Doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means that it's really hard and you got to do a lot more work. And then more times than not, people fail and then they feel bad about themselves and then they eat some more because then that's like that quick release, right? So we're stuck in this cycle, and this is not just with food. This is with a lot of areas in our life. So just notice that if you have this sort of a pattern, and if what you're trying to do to resolve it is focusing on it from a behavioral standpoint. I'm going to take just a moment to look at the chats because I have people kind of writing in. So Joanne said she's had CBT counseling in the past. It helped It's the only kind of counseling that's helped her. So Joanne, I'm glad that you found that helpful. Janie, I found that therapy only works when I'm in therapy, and I find it very hard to apply after the therapy ends. Which, I would say this, there are like, therapy is not, it's not like one animal. It's like every therapist and every type of therapy can be a completely different animal. And so what I would encourage people to do is, if you are in therapy, is to seek out something where you're learning skills and you're applying it in between sessions. And then you have somebody that's working with you to keep you accountable and to check in with you and to make sure that there's progress. And it's not like I'm just showing up to talk to you about my week, but I'm actually like, we're moving the needle. Okay. And that's really the only way that therapy is really going to work. Sandra said, I had CBT, it worked to some extent, but I went backwards when I had to care for my mom. Yeah. So, Sandra, again, if you're learning a skill and you're applying it, hopefully it keeps moving forward. Sometimes we go back. Sometimes there's that step back because we're just overwhelmed, right? We have all this, maybe like you have to take care of your mom and you're not focused on you. And so you get out of balance and things like that. So then you want to you kind of need to recalibrate and figure out for yourself, like, how do I get back to me? And what do I need to do to start to either get back in therapy and try to continue the work, or take what I've learned and start to apply it to me? Let's see. Yeah. And Janie is agreeing that caring for parents is horrendously exhausting. Very hard. I love how you guys are also supporting each other in the chat. So Janie said, David, I really understand about relationships and arguing. I have such high hopes with each new relationship, but it's a full-time job, just coping with me, I guess. And Joanne said, I've had a lot of counseling in the past. I found that there's no aftercare or follow-up afterwards. Yeah. So like I said, therapy can be different things to different people, and different therapists kind of work it differently. And I would say that it's not necessarily meant to be a forever thing. And if you can find the kind of therapist who is teaching you skills, and then you're able to get back to a place of balance, and you have that tool set, like I always told my clients, my job as I see it is to build up your toolkit so that you can help yourself and that you're not reliant on the therapy. So that's what I would encourage everybody to look for in a therapist. Okay. Joan, I hear you, and I'm getting back to the presentation. Okay, so just wanted to kind of check in with you guys. All right, so like I said, when you're working from a behavioral standpoint, it can work, but remember that it also requires so much mindfulness, where you're constantly having to take, like, be aware of the kinds of thoughts that are coming up, and to see like what that is causing you from an emotional standpoint. And, part of what I teach also is how to clean up your thought process, which I think is an important piece of the puzzle. That's what they essentially teach in CBT, right? And that can work really well, but it also is quite a bit of work, because if you're the kind of person who has that on autopilot, which often we do, and we'll talk about that today, then you're going to be generating these negative kinds of self-talk statements over and over again. And you're going to have to kind of slow everything down and like be able to pause and ask yourself, like, what am I saying? Is this helpful? Do I want to feel this way? How do I change it? Right. So all of this kind of takes a lot of mindfulness. So we're going to talk about another way to deal with this that requires a little less work, because I know you all are really dealing with the stuff, and I'm always looking for the most effective and efficient way to do things. So, so just hang on with me. Now, I've mentioned now so far, we've got our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors kind of in that order. And what I want to say is this: you can be in the same situation as someone else and have completely different interpretations of that situation. So I use the example of COVID, where some people see it as this disaster zone, like, oh my God, like everything's so different and it's scary and I don't know what's going to happen and it's horrible. And then you have other people who are like, this is the best thing ever. I can't believe like so much great stuff has happened in my life. And now I get to do this and I didn't get to do it before, and blah, blah, blah. Right. So it's really not the circumstance that is causing all this stuff. It's our thoughts. But the question then is, why is it that different people have different interpretations of the exact same events, right? Why do some people get really stressed out or become really anxious when there's, if we're going to use the example of COVID, and other people are finding it as an opportunity and they're just like having a great time? Why that discrepancy? And the reason for it is because of our beliefs. Okay. So basically think of it like this. We all have had our individual experiences on the planet. A few of you have already mentioned that you've had some early life experiences that were pretty challenging. Often it's our parents, our caregivers. It could be in school with our peers. So these are our formative years. And that's where we come into the world as kind of like a blank slate. And all of these experiences are starting to kind of shape how we see ourselves, other people, and the world. All right. So that's why we each have our own lens. It's through those early life experiences that we're developing that lens. And as experiences are happening now, like COVID, then we are seeing it through that lens. So that's why we say, everything is subjective, right? We're not talking about the fact that there's COVID, but like how it makes you feel is a direct correlation to the thoughts that you have about it, which go back to your beliefs, right? So if you're the kind of person who grew up, let's just use an example, to believe that the world is a dangerous place, then when this happens, then you're going to get into fight or flight. You're going to have anxiety about it. Okay. If you're the kind of person who feels really safe in the world, you're more likely to interpret this as just like something to be mastered, right? And you're not going to get all frazzled about it. So let's talk about how this all kind of happens. So imagine for a moment that there is a little girl that grows up in a very loving family where the parents are always telling her how wonderful she is and how much they love her, how much they care about her. And, they really demonstrate that love and they're supportive and all that. When that little girl grows up, and I want you to put this in the chat, how will she see herself? So fill in the blank. I am blank. And what will she say about herself? So Rachel says amazing. Sandra says I am secure. Joan says confident and okay. Alina says not alone. Okay. Yeah. So Kelly says I'm worthy. And Janie says, I'm unable to believe these statements unless I have the experience of accomplishment for myself. And Janie, stay with me because we're going to come back to that. That's kind of like a mindset obstacle. We're going to talk about why that happens and what to do to overcome that. And Joanne says, it's not my fault. Okay. So, right. So the idea is when you grow, and when says worthwhile. Yeah. So you guys are all on the right track, right? Like I am worthwhile. I'm worthy. I am I'm not alone, like I'm supported, I'm loved, like all these things, right? Now, down the street from this girl is a little boy, and he grows up in a family that is kind of abusive. The parents are neglectful. They tell him, we never really wanted you. You're a mistake. And they just really don't show any love to this little boy. Now, when that little boy grows up, tell me in the chat what you think he will say about himself. I am fill in the blank. I feel alone. I'm unlovable. I'm invisible. Absolutely. Angry, unworthy, useless. Yeah, exactly. Now, it's not that the little girl is a better person than the little boy. Can you agree with that? Right? It's not anything to do with them. It has to do with their environment and their circumstances, right? And some of us are lucky to be born into families like this little girl, and others are less lucky because they have these other circumstances that, it's like there's this adversity that you have to deal with. Now, I say lucky and unlucky, but the truth of the matter is that's not a good statement to say, because I truly believe that we grow through adversity. And actually, the people who have had adversity in their life can often be like the most successful. Like, I think what it requires is real introspection, and it's an opportunity to look at yourself. And when you really invest in yourself, you can come out the other side so incredibly resilient, because you're like, hey, I've overcome this tremendous thing that's happened to me in my life, right? And I think that's where we kind of get lost sometimes. I hear a lot of my clients say things like, because I've had this trauma, or because I've experienced this thing in my life, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. And that is just the programming, right? It's just your kind of interpretation, but it's absolutely not a fact. And in fact, what I find is that when you find the right tools and you're able to kind of work on yourself, you can really turn your life around, and it becomes a real life worth living. So if you feel like you've kind of identified more with that little boy, then I want you to just stay tuned, because we're going to talk about what you can do. But in the same way that you saw that the little girl and the little boy have very different ways of thinking about themselves, the same is true about their interpretation of other people and the world. So people who grow up like that little boy are more likely to see the world as a dangerous place, whereas a little girl is more likely to see it as a safe place, right? And so people who tend to have more anxiety are just like less grounded because of sometimes of like their belief system and their early life experiences. So we're going to talk about what you can do with regards to that. Now, just going to look at my notes real quick. Right. So one of the things that I like to explain is we've got essentially two types of brains, right? We've got our primitive brain, which is that brain that is really meant to keep us safe in the world, and it keeps us in that survival mode. And so when we talk about anxiety, what we're talking about is that fight or flight. And that goes way back to like when we were, cave dwellers, and our whole existence depended on whether we were going to get through the day without getting eaten by, a saber-toothed tiger kind of a thing. And so when you came out of the cave and you had to kind of go out and look for food, if you came across any sort of danger, your brain would see something that could potentially kill you, and would like all the adrenaline would kind of kick in order to give you the energy to fight off the threat or to run as fast as you can. And if any of you have ever been in one of these situations, you'll know that when adrenaline kicks in, we actually have the ability to run a lot faster than if you were just going right now outside and trying to like race somebody, right? Or just to do a regular run. Like all of a sudden people have like these superpowers. You hear about women who like their baby is stuck under a car and they're able to like lift the car up. And then you ask them when they're not in that situation, can you lift up the car? And they can't, right? Like it's like these superpowers that come into place. And that's because our brain is trying to keep us in survival. Its job is to make sure that we're still alive and to be able to outrun or somehow escape this threat. So this is kind of how we evolved. Is we started out with this brain, and that was the only thing that we had to really worry about back in the day. But over time, we developed this prefrontal cortex, and that's where we have the ability now to do things like plan and organize and problem solve. And so one of the things that we're trying to do now is to make really good use of that prefrontal cortex, because we don't have to be in that survival mode all the time. And sometimes when we have these beliefs, like that little boy that feels like he's not safe, he's not worthy, all these things, they kind of come up in every situation that we're in. Okay. It's like, as I said, it becomes the lens through which you see the world. And so one of the things that we can do is we can use that prefrontal cortex to kind of manipulate our belief system and change it. So even though you've had your early life experiences, you can start to see the world in a new way. You can stop having the negative self-talk and the self-criticisms. You can learn to become a more compassionate person and to really love yourself. And a lot of times what I find with my clients is that they don't love themselves because of the way that they were treated as a child. And they've used that experience to make it mean that they're not lovable, they're not worthy of love. And so why would they give it to themselves? If my own parents can't give it to me, it must mean that I'm not worthy, right? And then they beat themselves up and they are really hard on themselves. So this is an opportunity to really kind of work on getting past that. So when we're talking about the primitive brain, it is it not only is there to keep us safe, the other thing it does is it's trying to be efficient. So those are its two functions. Okay. And when I say efficient, what I mean is it's looking for patterns. It looks for things that are familiar. And so if you have, like, think about like pre-COVID, what your life was like, right? You had your like routine every day. This is what I do. This is what my life looks like. And like good, bad, or indifferent, like that was just your habit. That was kind of how you were in the world. All of a sudden, COVID comes and it like shakes everything up. Now, all of a sudden, we don't know anything. We don't know, like, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Where are my kids going to go to school? Am I going to get sick? Am I going to die? Like all these things, everything just gets thrown up. And what it does is it takes all of the habits and all of the routine and all the familiarity out the window. And then what happens is our primitive brain, which, as we said, looks for those patterns, is like freaking out because it's like, I got nothing to hold on to here, right? And so that's where anxiety comes up. We have all this anxiety because there's like nothing familiar anymore. And so if you've experienced anxiety due to COVID or due to any sort of uncertainty or any sort of, like some of you mentioned that you're newly separated, so that's kind of a huge change. Like, your kids are leaving the house. There's all kinds of changes that are going on right now. All of these are throwing you off because you don't know what to predict and you're not able to control what's going to happen tomorrow. So your brain's looking for that certainty and it just isn't finding it. So as a result of that, we want to like find ways to calm ourselves down and to get really grounded and to feel like there is safety in the world, even in times of uncertainty. Now, Jenna, who coordinated the meetup, sent me some of your questions ahead of time. And so I'm going to do my best to get to those. But if I don't, then please let's take a moment towards the end and you can ask me any questions that you have. So the way, but I just want to kind of get through some of the stuff because I know that's what you guys came for. So as we said, people get really stressed out when they can't predict what's going to happen. Now, let's talk about stress for a minute. Stress is about perception, right? So it's kind of like we talked about that thought leads to the feeling. And if stress is an emotion, then it comes from some sort of interpretation, some sort of a thought or a perception of a situation that we're in. So it's really a story that you tell yourself about whatever is out there, right? And then that is going to make you feel a certain way. So if you tell yourself that, and usually I like to define stress as an equation. And so an easy way to think about it is if you consider, and one of you said this, Suzanne, you said that your job was really demanding. So it's anytime we perceive our situation where the demands exceed our resources, right? And in simple terms, what that means is like, I can't handle it, right? Like it feels like overwhelming. It feels like too much for me. Then you feel stressed out. But you can be in that same situation, or somebody else can be in the same situation as you and be like, oh, I totally can do this. Then that same situation isn't going to lead to stress. So again, remember that it's not stress or it's not the situation that is stressing you out. It's your thoughts about the situation and how you perceive your ability to cope with it that is going to determine whether you feel stressed or not. And as we said, your interpretation or the way that you see your ability to cope may also come from your belief system, because your beliefs are basically thoughts that you've been thinking over and over again. Okay, that's how beliefs actually get formed. And the reason I want you to understand the definition for beliefs is because oftentimes people are like, well, I don't believe that I can do this, or I don't believe that that's true. And then we have what we call limiting beliefs. These are things that you believe, but maybe you don't want to believe anymore because you know it's limiting you. Like one of you mentioned sabotaging and things like that, all comes back to that. So what I'm saying is that if a belief is a thought that you've had over and over again, then what happens? It becomes ingrained. Then we can create new beliefs just by rehearsing a new thought that you don't believe right now over and over again. And your brain will eventually have that new thought become ingrained and become your new belief. So think of your brain as a computer. It's basically there to serve you. It doesn't really care if, like, imagine your computer right now. Okay. It doesn't care if you're on this Zoom call or if you want to use it to check your emails. It doesn't have an opinion. It's like, I can do all these things. Tell me what you want and I'll do it for you, right? It's there to serve you. So that's how you have to think about it. And then it's an invitation for you to take what you want, in other words, the new belief, and to make that become ingrained by practicing. So I'm going to show you 5 steps to make this come, where you can take like something that you write on paper where you say like, I want to believe X, and how that becomes ingrained for real in your brain. Okay. So let me just see where I'm at. Okay. I was kind of just going a little bit off the cuff, out of order. So, okay. So I think that's kind of the, if you will, like the introduction to everything. So what we have in order now is your beliefs, which then through that we filter information about things that are happening right now. That's our thoughts. And from our thoughts, we have emotions. And from the emotions, we have behaviors. And those behaviors create the results in your life. So whatever results you're seeing right now, you can kind of work your way back. Like, what did I do to create that result? What was I feeling to do that behavior? What was I thinking that made me feel this way? What did I believe that made me think this way? Right? So you can kind of see how they're all intertwined. Okay. So, okay, so now we want to talk about, because we mentioned the primitive brain is looking for those patterns. The reason it does that is, as I said, it wants to be efficient, and it does that by creating, not creating patterns, but like automating behaviors. So think about when you wake up in the morning, you don't have to consider like, should I brush my teeth? Maybe I should do it later. Or where did I put my toothbrush? Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. I did it yesterday. Like these thoughts don't really come up, right? Like you just kind of get out of bed and you automatically brush your teeth. It's an automated process where you're just kind of like, this is just what I do. Or like, think about when you get in the car, how many of you have ever driven somewhere and then when you got to your destination, we're like, I don't even remember driving. I just like, anybody kind of just automatically got there and they're like, I don't remember the whole ride over, right? So we do things in an automatic process, and that's so that we don't have to become overwhelmed with thinking about all the stimuli that's coming in. Like our brain's automatically filtering things, and it's getting you to do things so that you don't have to focus on like brushing your teeth and driving. You can focus on other things, right? You can focus on all the other more important things that require the more sophisticated mind, the prefrontal cortex, to conceptualize, to plan, to organize, to problem solve. Like if I have to think about every little thing I do, like every time I bite my nail, or if I, I'm chewing or whatever, like it would be like information overload. And so what we want to do is think about how to create these automatic processes in our subconscious mind where we don't have to think about it, that can align us with the results that we want to create in the world, because it all starts from the belief level. So that's kind of why we do the work on the subconscious. It's very different from what you're doing in your therapy, where you're talking about things that you're consciously like bringing in, like, hey, this week this thing happened, let me talk about it. That's already, you're conscious of it, but there's like stuff underneath. And one of you mentioned like you're in therapy and like all this stuff is coming up right now that you weren't aware of. Now the thing is, everything that has ever happened to you is in there. There's like drawers. Think about it like that. There's like drawers in there. Everything gets stored. Now we don't have access to it all, but every once in a while something happens and it surfaces. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to change the belief system and the programming so that we have different results. So one of the obstacles in this work, however, is because your subconscious mind wants to remain efficient. When you try to bring up this new program, it usually pops up and says, you know what, you really don't need to do that. We already have a program. Like, I'm going to need to, like, this is going to take just more time and so forth. And so your job is to make a decision. I want to do this. I'm going to stay consistent with it, and I'm going to practice it until it takes effect. Because what we know is it takes at least 21 days of consistent practice to create a new habit. So we want to stay consistent. And I would say that for some of you, 21 days is going to be sufficient. For others, it might be more like 30 days or maybe 60 days, but it's not a lifetime. It's not years, but you have to at least make that commitment to, I would say, the first kind of month to stay with this, because it will take effect over time. And remember, like, you get to make the call. So it just means that you figure out what that's going to look like for you. Now, when we talk about sabotage, we talk about like the things that we do that we want to typically change. What I've kind of categorized it under is either things that we do too much or things that we do too little, or things that we experience like too little or too much. So one of you mentioned confidence. So when we have too little confidence, we want to have more confidence. Or if we're a perfectionist, we're kind of overcompensating. We're doing too much of something. When we overdrink or we overeat, those are things that we do too much. So this is a way of kind of thinking about what in my life am I not in balance with, where I'm doing too much or too little. And that's kind of an opportunity to write down some of the things that you want to change. What I would encourage you to do is whatever you pick, to work on one theme at a time. So let's say you're going to give it 30 days, you're going to just pick the first thing on your list or the first thing that you want to work on before you move on to the next thing. And once you've identified the theme, then we can talk about what kinds of things will help you to change that. So the way that I like to teach this work is that you pick your theme, and then for that theme, you write down all of the, number one, the beliefs, if you can identify them, that are limiting you, the thoughts that come up around that, right? So like if you're the kind of person, let's say, who beats yourself up, so you might write, like, what are all the self-critical statements that I hear myself say to myself, right? I had a client yesterday who said, I always tell myself when I make a mistake, I tell myself, oh, you're stupid, right? So these are the kinds of like statements you might hear yourself say when you're beating yourself up. If you're working on your own kind of self-talk, your relationship with yourself, this is an opportunity to write all those things down. So it could be like your thoughts, it could be your beliefs, write those all down, the things that you want to change. It can also be emotion. So like a lot of you mentioned you struggle with anxiety in particular. Some of you had some depression on board. So like having those emotions, and especially if you've had this for a very long time, it's chronic, like you want to work on it, you want to change it once and for all, write that down. If it's a behavior, something that you do over and over that sabotages you, like one of you mentioned, I sabotage my relationships, write that down. If as I mentioned, some of the behaviors of like doing too much or too little, like the overeating or, any kind of addiction, things like that, you write those things down. So you have an opportunity to really get clear on what it is that you want to change. Then next to each of those things, you're going to want to write the opposite. You're going to want to write, what do I want instead? So if you beat yourself up, like my client who tells herself, you're stupid because she made a mistake, she can ask herself, like, what can I tell myself instead when I make a mistake? So when I make a mistake, what I want to tell myself instead is fill in the blank, right? Like, oh, like everybody makes mistakes, or, you tried your best. So you're going to come up with a statement which you would prefer to have on autopilot to replace the one that you currently have. So far, so good, everybody? Yeah. Okay. Once you have your turnaround statements, right? And again, it could be like, if we're talking about thoughts, it's pretty straightforward. If we're talking about your emotions, you want to kind of backtrack and ask yourself, like, if I feel anxious, what are the situations where I feel anxious? And what do I tell myself when I'm in those situations? And then you can kind of back it up to the thought level, because we said they're related. So maybe it's like situations of uncertainty, situations when I don't have control, situations that I can't really predict, situations, or even like more specific things, like anytime I'm around my in-laws, or anytime I'm around people that I don't know, strangers, or when I have to do some public speaking or whatever it is. So identify the situation and what specifically causes you anxiety, write that down. And then you can say, when I'm in that situation, how do I want to feel instead? And what do I need to have the thought be instead of like what it currently is? Okay. So that's what we want to do. And I call these our turnaround statements. So you want to identify the problem areas, and then you want to flip them around, and you want to kind of identify, like, what do I want instead? Okay. So far, so good. Now, once you've done that, what you can do is you can take all of those statements. And again, they're all one theme to start off with. We don't want to do a mishmash of things. We want to be really focused, because we're focusing on reprogramming. So you want to take all those statements and you want to record them for yourself. So for each statement, you're going to read it out loud 3 times. So let's say the statement, instead of telling myself, oh, I'm stupid because I made a mistake, I'm going to tell myself, I did the best I could. Okay. Or I'm smart. Okay. Then I'm going to say, I'm smart, I'm smart, I'm smart. But what I want to say is that's probably not the best example, because you want the statements, when you're writing them down, these turnaround statements, you want them to be as specific as possible. So one statement might be like, instead of like, when I make a mistake, like I tell myself I'm an idiot, I'm going to say, when I make a mistake, I cut myself some slack. And I remind myself that I did my best, right? So something like that, where it's really specific to the situation. And then you're telling yourself like what you want to think and how you want to feel instead. Okay. Everybody with me so far? Okay. So we want to be specific. Now, when you do the recording, you're going to say, when I make a mistake, I cut myself some slack. When I make a mistake, I cut myself some slack. You can do it 3 times. And then you go to the next statement and you repeat that one 3 times. And you're going to go through all of your statements. And you want to have at least 15 statements like that, where they cover all the angles of your situation. All the angles of your situation, like it's when I make a mistake and when I'm here and when I'm there, and like you're kind of looking at it from all the, if we're talking about, let's say your self-talk, all the situations where you currently have negative self-talk, and then like changing each of your statements around. Pete, did you have a question? Yeah, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, when you say record, do you mean physically, audibly?
Yeah, you're going to take your phone,
yeah,
and you're going to hit record, and you're going to make an audio recording of yourself saying those statements 3 times each. So statement number 1, 3 times, statement number 2, 3 times, and you're going to go through your entire list like that.
Right.
Okay. Then
after to make sure recording.
Yeah, you're recording yourself. Then what you're going to do after you've gone through your entire list is you're going to go back to the top, and you're going to change the wording from I to you. So it would sound like this. When you make a mistake, you have your back, or you cut yourself some slack, or whatever the statement is. And you go and you only say that once, and you go through the entire list of statements again, changing the I to a you. So essentially each statement gets said 4 times, 3 as written. Get through all those, and then once again to the top, and you're changing the I to a you, and you're going through the entire list again with those new statements. Now, why do we do this? Why do we change I to you? Anybody have an idea? Anybody want to share? Alina.
I'm thinking that probably the parents would say, you are wrong, you are la la la. So then this kind of changes that dynamic, relationship dynamic.
Okay, good. Joan, you had an idea? I can't hear you. You're muted.
I was gonna say the same thing. It's like someone else is talking to you now. You're not talking. Oh.
Okay. Joanne?
Because when you say changing the I to the you, when you say about that situation, when you say I, you're thinking about yourself, and when you say you, you're thinking about yourself, but you're thinking about other people as well, how it affects other people.
Okay, so here's what happens. Like we said that a belief is a thought that we have over and over again. And that, right? Does that make sense? Or I said that wrong. A belief is a thought that you have over and over again. So at first, your thought was, ugh, I'm such an idiot. Ugh, I'm such an idiot, right? And then what happens is you start to hear it in the third person, don't you? You hear, you are such an idiot. Anybody? Does that sound familiar? Yeah, right? When it becomes ingrained as a belief, all of a sudden it becomes like there's another person inside talking to you, which is sometimes your own programming. And guess what? Sometimes It is the programming of other people. So if you grew up in that family where your parents kept telling you that you're an idiot, all of a sudden you're hearing them as your own voice in the third person. So what we want to do is we want to say I initially, and then we also want to have it become like crystallized as now it's like that third person validation of like, yes, you are giving yourself, having your back or cutting yourself some slack. Joan, you had a question?
No, not so much a question, but just talking about that in your head. The 12 steppers call it the itty bitty shitty committee.
I love that.
Which is what's in your head, the itty bitty shitty committee telling you all these bad things. And they go, wait a minute, there's nobody in my head but me.
I love that. I just wrote that down because it's so funny. Yes, I love that.
Can I just ask, with the I, when you're asking I?
Yes.
Yeah, it's 3 times.
Yes.
But then with the you, is it 3 times as well?
Once.
Just once.
Just once. You can do it 3 times, but you don't have to. The recording is really long. We want to aim for about a 15-minute recording. Okay. So what you can do it multiple times. The other thing I will do is I'll create a recording of all the statements. And then if it's shorter than 15 minutes, I'll just have it kind of be like on repeat until I get to 15 minutes. Okay. So you can kind of hear it maybe twice around or whatever you need in order to, because we want the practice daily to be 15 minutes. So you're recording, you create it once, then you have it there for you. And then the idea then is, and that's what we're getting to, our next step is then you're going to listen to it every single day, once through. And if you're really ambitious, I encourage you to do it maybe once in the morning and once at night. Everybody gets to decide what's going to work best for them. Now, here's what's important. I know you all are busy. Often, like I work with very busy people. I'm not giving you another thing to do that's going to take 15 minutes out of your life. So hear me out. The way that this works is your subconscious mind is always listening. So anything that's happening around you, it absorbs. You may not be conscious of it, but it is getting stored. And that's where you've kind of heard something over and over again. And all of a sudden it becomes ingrained, right? It's that repetition because your subconscious is always listening. So this is a recording that you listen to while you're doing other things. So when you wake up in the morning, if you're going to be like a person who listens to this first thing in the morning, you're going to listen to it while you are brushing your teeth and getting dressed and kind of getting ready for your day. You just have it in the background. If you're the kind of person who's going to listen to it at night, then it's like, I get out of the shower, I maybe like put on my PJs and I brush my teeth and I get ready for bed and I'm doing it then. If you're the person who's going to listen to it while you're out on your walk and you've got your headphones on, then you can do it then. You can do it when you're prepping dinner, right? You're in the kitchen and you're like dicing everything up and you're cooking and you just have it kind of playing in the background, right? So you get to decide when you listen to it, but the cool thing is that it's happening as you're doing other things. So it's not robbing you of your time. So, so far what we said is you're recording the statements 3 times. Then the next round, you record it to say the statement in the third person. You want the whole recording to be about 15 minutes. And then you want to pick the time of day that you are going to listen to it. And here's the thing. The more you hear it, the quicker it's going to sink in, right? So if you hear it once a day, it's going to take you X number of days for it to kind of become more ingrained. If you listen, I have a client right now who's listening to it twice a day, and she's getting faster results because of that. Okay, so the first thing that people mention that they notice is that they become more self-aware. So if you've been on that autopilot where you've been kind of beating yourself up, you're saying all these things to yourself, you might not even notice that you're doing it most of the time, right? all of a sudden people are starting to say like, hey, I noticed, like my client said yesterday, I noticed that I made a mistake and I said to myself, you're so stupid. And then I said, well, why am I saying that? She started to question it because she became more aware, right? So that's kind of the first thing you guys can expect is just like, it just slows down that automatic process and it brings it to the conscious level where you can start to ask questions and be like, why am I saying this? Or why am I doing this? Or like, does this make sense? Like what, you know, like I want something else, right? And the other thing people will say is that they'll start to hear that like little statements from the recording, they'll start to hear it in their mind. It just pops up. So all of a sudden you got the negative voice that's been there forever. And all of a sudden there's like competition because now there's this other voice that's like, wait, you know, like you're great. You know, you have your back and all this stuff. So that's kind of what we're going for. And eventually you're going to start to see like there's that tug of war, which up until now, no one's been challenging the negative voice. So you're giving some competition to that voice. And eventually that other voice starts to become stronger and it starts to take over and it starts to change who you are. It starts to change how you feel. Okay. And then what we know is that, you know, when we talk about self-sabotage, what we know is that we manifest our beliefs. So if you notice the results is that you're getting in your own way, that you're ruining your life in XYZ ways, if you're making your life harder for you and things like that, and you're like, but I don't want that, then that's the definition of sabotage. And then you have to kind of rewind the tape and remember, like, there's something that's fueling that behavior. And, you know, going right back to the top of the breakdown, that's your belief system. So you're manifesting that in your behaviors. And so that's why we want to start at the belief level, because it's a lot easier to change, remember, than working on a behavioral level. Okay. Questions? Alina.
I was wondering about the affirmations, statements.
Mm-hmm.
Can they be actually affirmation, I am worthy, I'm loved, or they have to be in a sentence that will be longer? Like when I do that, then something positive.
That's a really good question. So it can work to have something more generic like that. And certainly it has worked for people. I just think that it works some of the time and not all of the time because it's not very specific. So, okay, let me just summarize. I would say this, it can work, but I think it would work even better if you were more specific. So if you want to throw that in, maybe use that as one of your statements and then have other statements that are more specific. Like when I'm in this situation or when this happens, I tell myself this, or, you know, like in like things that you want to be true about yourself. So let me just look at some of the things. Like you said, you had difficulty prioritizing. So like I prioritize with ease. I make time for the things that are important to me. I have newfound motivation every morning when I wake up. I have focus for all the things that I want to do, you know, like really get in there and be very specific about the things that you want to manifest. Okay. Anybody else have
Thank
questions?
you so much. That was
Yeah, sure. Other questions? Anybody? Okay, so let's move on. So what we're doing in this work, I call it priming, brain priming. And if you know anything about painting a wall, right? When we have a dark color on the wall, we can't just show up and change the color, right? It would take multiple like layers of paint to change the color because the wall is already a dark color. So that's why we often have like a white background, and then it's easy to kind of, if I want to paint this black right now, no problem. Okay. What we do when we want to prep the wall for painting, when it's a dark, like let's say it's black and I want to turn it white, is we put primer on, right? We put primer and then we paint it white because it kind of preps the wall for that. In the same way, we can prime our brains. We can prime our brains for that change of your belief structure so that you can be aligned with the kind of goals that you have for yourself, that you're not sabotaging anymore, that you're not stuck in anxiety, that you're not depressed, that you're not, constantly criticizing yourself and you don't feel blocked and so on and so forth. Okay. And this is the work that you do in order to get there, is you get really specific about what it is, you break it down, you turn it around, and then you get into the habit of consistently listening to it over the course of several weeks until you start to feel different and still it starts to kind of really sink in. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Like some people, as I mentioned in the beginning, like to do it themselves. And any of you who want to like take it from here and just like go on and create your recording and go ahead and listen to it, like my blessings, and go ahead and do that. And you can always kind of get back in touch and let me know how it's going and things like that. But I also know that sometimes when we feel stuck, we don't know like exactly what to say, or we need a little bit more support. We need a little bit more coaching and things like that. And so I want to also let you know about like how you can do this work and not do it alone for those of you who want more. Okay. So I actually created a membership site where people like you are coming together in the way that we have today, and we do it together as a group. And what that means is that every month we focus on one theme. So let's say this month we're working on negative self-talk, and like next month we're going to be focusing, let's say, on confidence, and then month after that we're going to talk about perfectionism, or you guys bring all the things that you want to work on, and then every month we go from topic to topic. Now, what I do is I sit with you guys, I listen, and I take notes to all the things that you tell me, your statements, the things that you're stuck with, what you're dealing with, what you want to kind of resolve. And I prepare a recording for you. So for people who don't like want to do it themselves, they want like for it to be done and easy so that you can just kind of download it and listen to it. You want to make it as easy as possible for yourselves. I want you to know that's an option. So basically what we would do is we would get on a call like this once a week. You're welcome to come to as many or as few as you would like. And then if you can't make it live, what we do is we'll have the recording for you to watch the replay afterwards. You can always submit your questions ahead of time and I can answer them if you can't make it and you want your question answered. But we do this work together, and it is very powerful to do this in a group, because what I'm seeing is like the group members are also helping each other, right? Because I can teach you this stuff and I can coach you through it, but you guys are in it together. Like you have personal experiences that you can share with each other that make it really magical, right? One of the things that makes a lot of this really difficult for people is they feel very alone in their journey. And so what I'm doing is I'm kind of trying to create more of a community. So you feel like there are like-minded people, like you're in it together, you're helping each other. And so this is kind of a really beautiful opportunity to do this as a group. So basically what you get as part of this is you get the weekly calls where, I can coach you on the stuff. I also create some video content for you to watch that teaches you about, number one, we have our foundational videos of like how this 5-step process actually works, some of the things that we talked about today, but more in detail. And again, even when you're in the group process, if you decide you want to create your own recording, I will send out the statements that we're using for the group recording. Some people just like find it more effective to use their own voice. You're welcome to do that. But a lot of times my clients were like, you know what, just do it for me because I don't want to have to like do another thing. Right. So I will send out the recording. It's something that you can download as an MP3 file and just listen on your phone every morning or every night, whenever it is that you're doing this work. And so this is the opportunity for coaching and again, that community feel, but also some accountability. So this week I had one of the clients show up and she said, you know, I've been listening to it maybe like every third day and it's been helpful, but she's not being like really consistent, right? It's not like she's doing it every day. And what happens is she's not getting the results that other people in the group are getting. So I asked her, like, what would it take for you to do it every day? And this is where all the kind of mindset obstacles come up. Now, remember, we talked about this a little bit earlier, that the subconscious mind, right, tries to get in the way, right? It says, oh, you don't need to do this, right? And all your stuff starts to show up, like, especially if you don't believe you're worthy. It's like, why are you going to do this for yourself? And all this stuff starts to show up. So I said to her, I'm going to hold you accountable to listen to it every day for the next 7 days and then show up to next week's call. And I want to hear that you did that. Right. And for her, that was really helpful because sometimes like it's hard for us to do things for ourselves, but when there's somebody else there saying like, you know, I'm on you, then they find the motivation because they're like, I got to show up and I got to do this. Right. So, so that's what you get as part of this process. And, I want to just leave you with that, and I'll put the URL in the chat. But for anybody who is interested, it's called the Priming Lab. So it's just the priminglab.com. And what I'm going to do is we're going to get started in September with kind of the next theme, because we start basically at the beginning of every month. But I'm going to, for people who are joining, I'm going to actually do a meeting ahead of time in August to get everybody on board and to get all of your statements so that we can create the recording for September. So that's why we're kind of meeting ahead of schedule now to see who wants to join, and then we can coordinate a time to get everybody together to talk about, you know, what next month's theme is, what are the statements. I can pull those out and create the recording for you. So at this point, I'm totally happy to take any questions about anything I've taught you guys today, anything that you've shared either with Gemma in terms of questions, or some of the stuff that you brought in today that you said you wanted to get that maybe we haven't gotten to, or about the membership. So this is your opportunity to ask questions. Who wants to go first? Anybody have a question? No? Yeah, Joan, go ahead.
I wonder if you will be doing any more of these kinds of things. I would love for my daughter to experience what I've just experienced today and to learn about this method and your work. And I don't know if you'll be doing any more of these. So maybe you could individually write to me on that or something.
Well, if you've put your email in, I can also share the replay, and then you can send that to your daughter and she can watch it.
Sure. Okay. And then if she's interested, she can join the Priming Lab.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can be anywhere in the world you can be.
That's the beauty of this. You can be anywhere. Right. And it's so nice to have a tribe that kind of is representative of like all over the world. Wynn, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you know, when you're listening to the tape, the audio that you've created, can you listen to it whilst you're asleep? Because you said your subconscious never really switches off. Yeah.
So that's a question I get sometimes. And I'm not exactly sure what the science says about that. So you can absolutely try it, but I'm not sure what the correct response is, right? I mean, yeah, the subconscious does listen. When you have it in the background as you're doing other things, it's kind of powerful in the sense that your subconscious is listening, even if you're not paying attention. But when you do pay attention, it's like double strength in a way, because like you're thinking about it and your kind of subconscious is hearing it. So, I mean, if you want to do an experiment, let me know. if you only do it during your sleep, let me know if that actually does something, because that would be super cool to find out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Joanne?
Would it be helpful to like get a journal or notebook when you initially write down the statements, or would you advise against that sort of thing?
You mean like initially in order to come up with the statements for the recording?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. I mean, that's kind of part of the process, right? Is you have to figure out what it is that you want to reprogram. So you want to sit down with yourself. You want to write out all the things. And that's kind of what's nice about the group is like, if you're stuck, if you're not sure kind of what to put down on paper and what to put down on the recording, we kind of do it together. And I kind of taking a little bit from everybody. And I had a client that came on this week that said that she hadn't been at the original meeting where we were doing the kind of the elicitation where we were taking from everybody's statements. So she just came on and just started listening to the recording without having contributed her own statements. And she said that it still spoke to her. It was like a lot of people have the exact same sort of things that they struggle with. So it's kind of nice that even if you're not sure what to contribute, or you even like miss the meeting, you can still get the recording and get the same results at the end. And Alina, you had a question? Yeah.
Yes. Sorry that. I was wondering if this statement could work on, for example, on, I know there is this concept, I don't believe in the last part of it, seasonal affective disorder. I'm not sure if I have it or not, but basically I'm from another country, just very shortly, and moving abroad in Ireland at the moment, I do feel that idea of like, whenever it's raining, and obviously it's a difference, I don't feel grounded, I'm not doing anything, I miss home, I want to go home kind of thing. But my prefrontal brain knows that I'm here for a reason. I'm studying, I'm having my life here, and the universe sends us at some point in other parts of, I don't know where I'm gonna be living in like other years. So I was just wondering if you actually can work on this kind of like deeper thing, because I think the whole problems that I have, it's about that. I do have this seasonal affective situation that whenever it's awful outside, I feel awful inside, and I do things only when it's sunny. I feel myself and happy only when it's sunny.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think that there is definitely something neurochemical that gets affected for people who are really, I mean, I think we all are affected by the weather, but some people even more so than others. And I would encourage you to get as much like outside sunlight as possible. So even if it's not sunny out, just being exposed to the light outside can also help. And if that doesn't do it, they also sell these lamps that you can buy for very cheap. But when you sit under the lamp, even if you're just gonna like do your work on the computer or like read a book or something, just having that exposure mimics the rays of the sun, and that can trigger like the hormones in your brain to kind of get your mood kind of stabilized. So I would say try that. I don't know if this would work kind of to help with that, because it's not really a belief. It's more like a chemical reaction that's happening in your brain. Does that make sense? So I don't know that this would kind of necessarily resolve that, but I think there are other things that you can do.
Thank you so much. I do have a lamp, but I'm not using it for the same reason. I just kind of forget about it and get depressed because of the weather. But to be honest, I'm going to try with the recording to add one of those things as well. Kind of understanding I'm here, and I should just enjoy other moments rather than just looking up at the sky, not even, at the same level as me as like people or things. I'm just looking at the sky. Oh, great, it's raining. I just can't. Exactly. It's just an obsession already.
Exactly.
Thank you. Sorry for taking.
No worries. Okay, Joan, you had a question.
Real quick. So this is something that starts in September. And so like if we're interested in this, we would it would start, this is like you start it every so often, or I'm a little confused as how.
Yeah, so the way that it works is we do monthly themes. And so we have like rolling admission. What we want
Okay.
is to get people on board before the month starts, if possible, so that
Okay.
we can meet ahead of time, get a sense of all of your statements, and I can start to create some of the content for you. So like by September 1st, hopefully we've got, like, let's say we're going to do confidence next month, right? I'm going to create like videos for you guys to watch about confidence, and it's going to cover like all of the things, all the different areas where you guys like maybe are struggling. It could be like mindset issues, what have you, and misconceptions, myths about it, things like that. And then in conjunction to that, I'm going to create the audio recording, right? And in order to do that, I need input from the group, right? This is not stuff that I'm just like making up from my head. So I'm meeting with you guys ahead of time in order to get the data and be able to kind of put that into action so that we can be on track for September 1st. That's my goal for you guys. Okay.
Then how do you get how do you get the input for the next month? Do you get it at the end of the September meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you can miss a month and still do, the next month. Well,
yeah, but the theme is going to be different.
Right. Got it.
Right. Pete.
Yeah, is all the subscription information on the site itself?
Everything's on the site. So if you guys want to go to thepriminglab.com, you can, let me just make sure it's working, but you should be able to sign up right now. Let me just see. It says become a Priming Lab member. And then you have a monthly option, and you also have a yearly option if you want to save some money and like you want to be in this for a while and cover different aspects of your life rather than just like pay monthly. So it's up to you guys, like how you want to do it. But I've created this because it's a very low cost option for people who say like they can't afford coaching one-on-one. And it's very powerful work. So I think on some levels, it does things that therapy doesn't necessarily do. So for a lot of reasons, but basically like I'm trying to give you guys as much as possible for as little as possible.
I think it's interesting because I'll be totally honest with you. Up until about the last 15 minutes, I'd heard all of that before.
Okay.
I've done tons of research on this stuff.
Okay.
And I've had like 3 or 4 therapists over the course of my life, so I've heard lots of different ideas. But the last kind of 10, 15 minutes, it seems a quite original take, which is quite perceptive actually. So yeah, I'll certainly check it out.
Well, I would love to have you, Pete. If at the very least,
interesting idea. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I know that you're a little skeptical because you've tried so many things. I would say if you want to just take a chance for 1 month, right? There's no contract. You don't have to like be in it for a lifetime. If you want to just give it a shot for 1 month and kind of see what happens, it's
a method that makes sense to me. If it didn't make sense to me, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
It's a method that I can see how it could work.
Yeah, I try to make it as like low risk for you guys as possible. Like you're not tied into anything, you can try it out. And then after a month, you decide you don't want to renew, you don't have to. But it can really do a lot in 1 month. So.
Do you also do individual coaching or not?
I do individual coaching, but not as part of the membership. I will do like we did today, where like I'll talk to individual people on the call in the group setting.
Okay, you don't do one-on-one.
I do one-on-one, but that's like
separate.
Yeah. And if you're interested in that, then I'll follow up with you guys, whoever left their emails, and you're welcome to book a consultation call with me, and we can talk about what you're looking for and what that would look like. Okay.
I had a look at the site just now. It's all in American dollars.
It's in American dollars, yes.
Yeah. So how would you?
So it's powered by PayPal, so they'll do the conversions, so you don't have to worry about it. They'll do all the conversions. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay. All right, guys. So it's been a real honor to be with you. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I hope that you got something valuable from this. I hope that whether you come into the priming lab or not, that you do this work for yourself. And if you do it on your own, I would love it if you would share the results with me, you know, in a month's time. Let me know like how it's going. Keep in touch. Okay. And again, even for those of you who aren't interested in the program, want to do it on your own, if you've put your email in, I'm happy to add you to my list, and you can kind of be in the know of like projects that I have going on. So if I'm doing additional workshops in the future, you know, I have a podcast and all kinds of other resources I'm happy to share. I know Suzanne, you had Suzanne still here? She's not here, but she mentioned Burnout. So I have some other resources I'm happy to share with you guys as well. So again, if you leave your email in there, then I will definitely follow up. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very
all.
much.
All right. Take care, guys. Great
Thank
having
you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.